So, my name is Michael Olschimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We do this show here every Friday to allow you, the audience, to ask questions about data vaults, big data scenarios, data-driven solutions, everything data-related, right? You can use the chat here if you want. If you have a question, just raise it here. You can use the Q&A in the chat. Raise your hand to get voice. And you can also use a form, which I'm happy to show you after today's session, essentially. If you receive multiple questions, I would essentially cherry pick. It's wintertime, and in the wintertime, people have actually more questions than in the summer, apparently. So we have a couple of questions, but if you have any, just shoot them, right? So we're picking them up over time, it's no worries. It's time boxed a bit, so it's the typical perfect YouTube video, right? And if there would be no questions at all, I will talk about the cluster here. I'm not making that much progress at the moment, but yeah, I could make more progress. So, all right. We received a question here from the audience. Let me just share it to you. This is essentially one of the questions I already discussed a while ago. Come on, move. All right. More on dimension modeling. And the question here is essentially based on the redundancy in the dim asset dimension here. Because there's some company names or there's some redundant data in there. You got an asset, and then also you got the company behind the asset, essentially. For example, let's say Volkswagen, for example, and so on. And because they might have multiple assets and multiple shares, they might have different redundant data in there, essentially. And the question is, once we have multiple assets, like different Volkswagen shares, for example, the question is, you might have redundant descriptive fields in the dimension, essentially. So what they've done is essentially they denormalize the company data with the asset data, essentially. So does it make sense or not? That's the first part of the question. Let's focus on this one. The second one is all about the other way around. It's about more normalization. Let's say you have something where you do a lot of filtering on it. Does it make sense to separate this into their own dimension? Let's focus on this one here first. And I want to give you two answers because it depends. On a traditional database, let's say a SQL Server, Oracle, something. Or when you, let's say, when you can do joins, when you can do actually star schemas, right? In this case, from a modeling perspective, I typically would denormalize the data already in the, normalize the data already in the data vault model, in the raw data vault, start normalizing it and create my own entities for asset and for company. And based on that design, it would naturally lead to two independent dimensions. Now, it depends a bit because in the information mart, I'm very much driven by the information requirements. So if the user would like to have a essentially denormalized dimension with asset and company, I'm happy to produce that. I would try to find out the reasoning for that, but let's assume there is a reason, a good reason for that. So let's go for it. And then I'm switching this design from this data vault model, where I have two different hubs, asset and company, into a denormalized model where I combine those typically. So I'm pretty much driven by the information requirements, what the user wants, essentially. Would I do this? If I would be the dimension modeler, let's say, not my preferred design. So I would most probably create two different dimensions here if I would design the information mart, which we often do as well, right? I would create two different dimensions here, one for company, one for asset. Multiple reasons for that. First of all, modeling-wise, I think it's a better model. And then and also a bit better to use, in my opinion, because it's easier to find the right attributes. I don't have to look for the asset dimension to find the company attributes, for example. And then the other reason is why I would do this is it's easier to produce from a data vault. If you separate the company data from the asset data, it's easier to produce independent dimensions. Yeah, you can denormalize them as one more operation, essentially, right? So a bit more, not much more complicated, but it's a bit more complicated to produce a denormalized dimension. There's multiple reasons why I would separate those if I do the whole modeling, right? So it's number one. That's answer number one. The second answer is it depends, I said initially, because it depends on technology. So if you're on a column-based storage, let's say Parquet files on a data lake on Cloudera, for example, or if you are on a, let's say, some column-based storage, let's say Greenplum or Redshift or whatever. In this case, you can't afford to join, and I wouldn't do star schemas anyway. So in this case, I would create a flat and white structure, and that has a lot of redundant data in there, right? So, but it's much faster to aggregate, and you want to avoid the join essentially. So that drives the other decision. And I know in this context, they were more on the column-based storage. So the answer would be no, just denoise everything, right? Because it's much faster to query the information out of it. But it's a bit short, so you need to know the context. All right, so it depends really if you can join or not. If you're more on row-based storage, more column-based storage. On the column-based storage, I would go flat and white. All right, if a dimension attribute is often used in filtering, does it make sense to separate this into their own dimension? Nah, I wouldn't do it. I would rather create an index on this attribute in a dimension. So, and that means data vault-wise in the satellite where you store the attribute, right? So there must be a satellite that provides you the attribute, let's say last name for the customer. That becomes the last name attribute in a dimension. Based on the PID table, we join the satellite. So the satellite contains the data. That's where you want to have the index for your where condition. And that should be it. So I would actually create additional indexes on my data model, depending on your typical queries or your most common queries, essentially. That's what I would do. Yeah, instead of separating it. Because separating means you also need to join this, right? So yeah, I would try to avoid that. Okay, cool. A good question. Right, if you have any question like this, anything data vault related, data driven related, dimensional modeling, all good, right? Shoot them us. So you can use the form here, sfr.ee/ddfriday. Use that form to submit your questions. You can upload pictures, drawings if you want. Keep them small, right? So they should fit on one slide. Don't send me these we sometimes get these very large models. They must be readable on a typical HD resolution, just saying, right? Because otherwise I might zoom in and cut a lot of stuff around it. But yeah, I mean, you saw the slides here in the session, perfect. The other thing is, check out scalefree.com/webinars, sharp symbol and webinars. It's on the website as well. Because we have additional sessions. I just started this with data vault sessions every Friday, but we also have Warescape expert sessions, and we have DBT expert sessions once a month. So those are also driven by consultants who know these tools better than me. And yeah, worth to check out. Yeah. Give it a shot. Once a month, same registration place where you can register for this webinar, you can register there. Cool. Yeah, looking forward for your questions. It's raining here in Germany, so I'm not sure what the weekend will be, but we should do all the best you can. And yeah, enjoy. Thank you, guys. See you next Friday. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining today. If you'd like to discuss this further, give us a call on the number below here, and we're happy to discuss this with you. See you next time. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.